The average American mortgage rate rose 8 basis points this week because two countries are trading missiles over a shipping lane, which is one way to price a 30-year fixed loan. I am Lambert Woollingham, and this is the Daily Shear for Sunday, July 19th, 2026. Somewhere between the Rio Grande and the Strait of Hormuz, water and diplomacy are both failing to hold their banks, and I've been asked to read about it in a calm voice. Closer to home, the ground is still underwater, literally and administratively, starting with the federal paperwork that finally caught up to the flooding. The flood response Texas has been running on its own now has federal backing. President Trump signed a disaster declaration Saturday authorizing the Federal Emergency Management Agency to coordinate relief across 28 counties and to cover 75% of the cost of emergency work already underway, including search and rescue, medical care, and debris removal. The declared zone runs from South and Central Texas through Uvalde, Kerr, and Bexar counties down toward the border, matching the state-level disaster Governor Abbott declared earlier. State and local crews have carried out hundreds of swiftwater rescues over the past week as rivers keep surging downstream. The Federal Emergency Management Agency says a fuller package of aid will wait until the water recedes enough to actually count the damage. Downstream, the river settled an old argument about who controls the border, at least temporarily. More than 100 marine buoys installed to block crossings near Eagle Pass broke loose Thursday night and floated 20 miles down the Rio Grande, forcing officials to shut both of the city's international bridges. The spheres are part of Governor Abbott's Operation Lone Star, installed in 2023 for $850,000, and state crews had already pulled a separate stockpile of shipping containers out from under the Eagle Pass Bridge to keep it from following. The river crested at 16.11 feet by Friday morning, well past flood stage, forcing evacuations in several farming communities along the bank. The buoys, as of this writing, remain at large. Austin, meanwhile, has simply closed its water to the public. The city banned all use of Lake Austin, Lady Bird Lake, and the Colorado River below Longhorn Dam, effective immediately, after the Lower Colorado River Authority opened multiple dams to handle hill country runoff and turned the current lethal. The Austin Fire Chief's order covers kayaks, paddleboards, motorized surfboards, and anything else that floats, and it holds until at least 5 p.m. Tuesday. Police spent the weekend warning people that the surface looks calm while the undertow underneath is not, and that riverfront trails remain prone to flash flooding without notice. The one silver lining is that Lake Travis hit 100% capacity for the first time since 2019, which is a strange way to end a drought. Houston, for its part, produced the paperwork on a different kind of overflow. The city's first mandatory disclosure report shows police handed 18% of people carrying immigration warrants over to federal custody this spring, at least 103 transfers since April. The Houston City Council ordered the reporting after public pressure over how officers were handling undocumented residents during routine arrests, and the numbers now show a fairly steady pipeline running alongside the department's public insistence that it stays out of immigration and customs enforcement field operations. The disclosure lands weeks after a botched immigration and customs enforcement operation in Houston ended with the fatal shooting of a Mexican national. From flood zones to spreadsheets, where the numbers are just as wet, only this time it is home values going under. Home prices in the country's most expensive markets are falling back toward earth, and Austin is leading the descent. Mid-tier prices have dropped below their pandemic-era peaks in 28 of the 33 priciest metros tracked, with Austin down 27% from its high, followed by Oakland at 25% and New Orleans at 19%. Year over year, prices fell in 25 of those cities, and Austin again posted the steepest annual drop at 5%. New York and Chicago are the outliers, both setting new price records, while San Francisco is seeing a localized bidding war in luxury properties driven by artificial intelligence investment money, even though its mid-tier prices still sit 8% below their 2022 peak. Buried in the bond market is a number that should concern anyone who enjoys borrowing money. The yield on 30-year Treasury inflation-protected securities hit 2.91% Thursday, the highest since the bonds were reintroduced in 2010, and a stark reversal from late 2021, when the Federal Reserve's own bond buying had pushed that same yield down to negative 0.6%. Investors are now demanding nearly 3% above inflation to hold government debt for 30 years, on top of automatic adjustment for the Consumer Price Index. The standard 30-year Treasury yield sits at 5.06%, implying the market expects inflation to run around 2.15% a year for 3 decades. With $31.8 trillion of marketable Treasury debt outstanding, that gap is the market's way of billing the government for all the years it borrowed for nothing. The other inflation problem has nothing to do with consumers and everything to do with data centers. Import prices for computers and electronic products are climbing again, this time driven not by shipping bottlenecks or stimulus checks, but by the world's largest technology firms buying up semiconductors, networking gear, and servers to build artificial intelligence infrastructure at industrial scale. That demand is straining manufacturing capacity in Asia and pushing hardware prices higher before the goods even clear American ports. The pressure is now working its way through the broader supply chain, complicating the Federal Reserve's effort to finish off inflation while the tech sector runs its own unsupervised arms race. That bond market turmoil is arriving on doorsteps in the form of a higher mortgage bill. The average 30-year fixed rate rose to 6.48% this week, and the 15-year fixed climbed 8 basis points to 5.90%, reversing what had briefly looked like a cooling trend. The catalyst was the escalating military conflict between the United States and Iran, which pushed up long-term Treasury yields that lenders use to price home loans. Buyers already contending with record inventory and unaffordable payments now get to watch overseas airstrikes show up in their monthly quote. Japan, meanwhile, is buying its way out of that kind of exposure. The government is financing the purchase of 27,500 NVIDIA processors to build a sovereign artificial intelligence computing hub set to launch in 2028 and tied into the country's industrial robotics sector. It is part of a plan to build a $124 billion domestic artificial intelligence market by 2032, and to stop depending on foreign cloud providers. NVIDIA's Jensen Huang confirmed the deal in Tokyo, and firms like Keyence and Fanuc, which already build the sensors and assembly line robots, stand to run all of it on hardware the country now owns outright, immune to export controls or someone else's cloud outage. Overseas, the fighting kept pace with the water back home, starting with the exchange that finally produced American casualties. The conflict with Iran crossed a line this weekend that it had not crossed before. An attack on a base in Jordan killed 2 American service members, left 1 missing, and hospitalized 4 more, the first US deaths from direct Iranian action since the war began in February, and US Central Command answered with a wave of strikes across southern Iran early Sunday. American bombs hit missile and radar sites in Hormozgan province, with explosions reported near Bandar Abbas and Keshem Island, and Iranian state media confirmed damage to an electricity and desalination plant, along with highway tunnels and bridges serving the country's main southern port. The stated goal is to degrade Iran's ability to keep blockading the Strait of Hormuz, a passage that used to carry a fifth of the world's oil. In Venezuela, the death toll from last month's earthquakes finally has a number attached, and it is not a small one. The interim government confirmed 5,069 dead as of Friday, once heavy machinery cleared enough debris to reach the hardest-hit towns in La Guaira state, more than 3 weeks after magnitude 7.2 and 7. 5 quakes struck the coast and set off over 1,300 aftershocks. 190 buildings collapsed outright, and another 856 are structurally unusable. The count of injured has sat at 16,740 for 11 straight days now, mostly because the hospitals ran out of room to put anyone else. Kyiv absorbed one of the larger barrages of the war overnight. Russia launched 41 drones and 25 ballistic missiles at the capital. Ukrainian defences intercepted 18 of the missiles and shot down 108 of the drones, which still left enough getting through to start fires in 5 separate districts. Rescue crews pulled 5 people out of burning buildings in the Sviatoshinsky and Shevchenkivsky districts, recovered 1 body, and sent 16 wounded to hospitals. Russia's defense ministry described the strike as aimed at facilities that build Flamingo drones and Neptune missiles, part of a broader push to hit Ukraine while its stock of Patriot interceptors runs low. Tehran, for its part, closed the one door still technically open. An Iranian negotiator confirmed Saturday that the country is suspending its commitments under the interim diplomatic arrangement with Washington, the last formal restraint standing between the current exchange of strikes and a fully unmanaged war. The move lines up with the Jordan attack and the American bombing runs that followed, and there is no remaining framework meant to stop further escalation over the Strait of Hormuz. Both militaries are now operating without a diplomatic channel to fall back on. In Hungary, the head of state signed the paperwork ending his own job. President Tamás Sulyok approved a constitutional amendment terminating his term, the latest step in Prime Minister Péter Magyar's campaign to dismantle what he calls Viktor Orbán's old mafia state after unseating Orbán in April. Magyar had accused Sulyok of acting as a leftover puppet of the former government, and Sulyok signed the measure hours before the legal deadline, using a Facebook video to complain that the whole process trampled the rule of law. Parliament now has 30 days to elect a replacement, and until then the Speaker of the Legislature holds the presidential duties, having apparently drawn the short straw. And in Miami, US Marshals arrested Andrew and Tristan Tate on a sealed warrant tied to a new round of charges out of the United Kingdom. British prosecutors authorised 38 additional counts over the weekend, bringing the total to 59, including rape, sex trafficking, and facilitating trafficking for sexual exploitation involving 7 alleged victims between 2010 and 2017. The brothers, who built an online following largely by monetizing misogyny, will stay in federal custody while the Department of Justice processes their extradition to Britain. Their lawyer has already called the case a coordinated political attack tied to a separate defamation suit the brothers filed in the US. Take this fully seriously. Somewhere downstream of Eagle Pass, there are now more than 100 unmoored $850,000 spherical buoys drifting toward the Gulf of Mexico with no jurisdiction, no mooring, and apparently no plan. At some point, one of them is going to wash up on a beach near Corpus Christi, looking like abandoned patio furniture, and somebody is going to have to decide whether it is still federal property, state property, or just a large orange ball now. I would like to be there when Operation Lone Star sends a boat out to retrieve its own border wall. Failing that, I would settle for the buoy filing its own asylum claim, since it has clearly crossed more of the river than anyone it was built to stop. Lake Travis is full for the first time since 2019, which means Central Texas has now been rescued from drought by the exact same water currently making it illegal to swim in the lake. That is the ledger for today, and I intend to spend the rest of the morning far from open water and floating border equipment. Lambert Woollingham, checking out before anything else comes unmoored. The day has been shorn until tomorrow.